It's Trundl Talks. It's Trundl Talks. It's Trundl Talks.
Welcome, Evan. Welcome, Joshua. We are very glad that you were able to join us today on this episode of Trundle Talks. The conversation that we'll be having today will be revolving around app development in Atlassian Marketplace. And we're very glad that we could have you guys as SmartDraw and VisualScript is a very successful app development organization, and you guys have some brilliant apps to kick off. So I would first like to ask Joshua, you and Evan, how do you guys start from the very first step? So like from the ideation, what's the life cycle of an app, and how do you on what approach do you take when it comes to converting an idea to an app for the Atlassian marketplace?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and there's kind of a couple of paths, that we at SmartDraw and VisualScript have taken. One is adapting an existing app into the marketplace, and one is actually creating something new from the ground up. As Atlassian as a platform has grown and grown and grown, there are apps that maybe exist outside of the marketplace already. Already have a market. Cliffy, a popular diagramming add-on started this way. It was a web app, and they kind of worked their way into the Atlassian marketplace. SmartDraw was the same way, where the life cycle there is really taking your existing app and creating a layer for it to talk to the platform. Basically wrapping your app in some way. It's a very different life cycle than I'm starting up fresh. I've got nothing. I've got no existing baggage, no existing technical debt, and it's much more like VisualScript was like. That was a from ground up, and the ideation stage is really about in the construct of how Atlassian works and what that looks like, and how people use Jira and Confluence and Bitbucket and et cetera, how that platform gets used. What's going to solve a pain there, right? You got to eventually start with, I've got this cool idea, but how's it going to improve the success of my customer? How's it going to affect the people that are going to use this? What pains are they feeling, and how can we help them? You need to start there. And then for us at SmartDraw, then you get into the technical feasibility side. We know we've got a pain. We know we've got customers who are interested. We know that this is addressable, right? The marketing side of things. Then you move into, okay, can we pull it off, right? Like, are the APIs there? Can we get the information we need? How does it impact the performance, right? Then you get into that's the technical proof of concept stuff. Can we actually do what we're trying to do? What do we need to make it happen? What tricks do we have to pull? And when you're building it out on your own, it's basically just you, right? I mean, it's code. You can bend it as far as you need to bend it. When you're working within another platform, there's all kinds of constraints of what you can do, what you can't do, what the platform allows and doesn't allow. It's very interesting in Atlassian because you've got server, data center, and cloud, and they have very different frameworks. Something you can do on server, you can't do in cloud. Obviously, Atlassian's working hard to evolve that, but they're not necessarily doing a one-to-one. So even though they might make something work in cloud that they're used to in server, it's not always the same way. So that first stage is starting with the pain, understanding the persona, understanding who you're building for, moving into that technical, what can we pull off is the first two big steps. Once you get into that, that's the bulk of the work. And there's a great programming adage of it's always that last 1%. You can get an app stood up, you can get the problem defined, you can get it all kind of working, and you get it going. And then you get into that last 1% and all the variety of little cases of, the server was really busy at that time. So this certain callback came back, 50 milliseconds slower, and that caused a race condition. All that stuff, right? That, in your lab, in your perfect world environment on your dev box works perfectly every time. That's kind of getting into the QA side, right? It's getting into the experience side of, great, we've defined the problem, we've figured the technical hurdles, we've got a proof of concept stood up. Now we're getting into real world. what's it like for a real user on a busy instance to actually use this app, and what is their experience like? And then you get into the nitty gritty of getting all that, really polishing that out until you get something that's really usable. In broad strokes, that's kind of the life cycle for us of how we build stuff out.
Yeah. A quick question there. You mentioned the server data center in cloud. Is there a preference, like if a new developer is just starting to pick up, should they be focusing on a specific type of offering out of the three to start building their product towards, and then focus on scaling it for the other two?
It's an interesting way to think of it, and the answer is kind of it depends, which is a frustrating answer. And again, you have to come back to that use case, right? If your idea you want to build is kind of catered towards a more server style deployment, right? So somebody who would traditionally choose to use server, thinking of something like automation, working with like kind of more traditional backend tools and be shuffling data around. If that's your use case, I'm just making something. If that's your use case, obviously you want to start with server because it fits your market better, right?
Sure.
If what you're getting out is something more generic, where ultimately you're going to go to all three, ultimately you're going to get there. There's a pretty good case to be made to go cloud first, because that's where Atlassian's focus has been over the last 12 to 18 months, kind of publicly. The downsides there, the risks there are cloud is different, right? What you're allowed to get away with there is very different. It can be very challenging to kind of get over that hurdle of doing it in cloud. You need to have your own infrastructure. There's all kinds of things you might have to do. Yeah. Forge changes that calculus quite a bit. Forge, while it's very young, lets you do this serverless style building of apps. Atlassian's trying to make it very easy for new engineers, for people trying to get into the market to really expand out and build some clever stuff. So I'd still say cloud's probably the best place to start if you're going to eventually go everywhere. There's a good case to be made for going server if you're a Java engineer, right? If that's what you're used to. If you're used to working in server side, if that's your whole chain is set up around that model, well, you can get something up and running much faster, and you can kind of get into the paradigms that might exist for Jira, let's say, or might exist for Confluence you have to deal with, even though the APIs might change. Like the way they're built, the coding patterns, the paradigm of an issue and a ticket and JQL, right? All that's going to be common. You'll be able to leverage that experience. So you can kind of stand on your expertise and build that out and then transfer that. So it gets a frustrating answer because it's kind of like, well, it depends. But the more you know about yourself as an engineer, the more you know about yourself as your idea, the more you know about your market. Because again, it always comes back to that. You can be a phenomenal coder, but if you're building something that nobody actually needs, doesn't actually address a problem, doesn't matter where you start, doesn't matter what you're coding.
Yes, it's basically what your problem statement is and who you are trying to solve it for, and then look where that audience is and then try to focus on them.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, Evan, my next question is basically to you. So VisualScript is one of the very famous tools now in the Atlassian Marketplace, which really helps safe implementation. So can you just brief us a little bit about VisualScript, how it came into existence, and some key highlights if you can share with us?
Yeah, so I'll let Joshua talk about how it came into existence, but I can talk about what VisualScript is. So it is basically a reporting solution for the Atlassian stack, and piggybacking on some of the stuff that Joshua said, reporting is critical in the Atlassian ecosystem. I come from a consulting background, and working with customers, they're always looking for better ways to report, better ways to answer questions, because really what it is answering questions with some form of visual communication. And what VisualScript does is it's available for both Jira and Confluence, and the app works, it displays reports directly in Jira dashboard gadgets or Confluence page macros. We specialize currently in areas like you just mentioned, so in a safe or really agile software development.
Yeah.
We do a lot of ITSM and ESM and DevOps as well. As far as our SAFE solution goes, we've done a few webinars on it now, and really what we focus on are the portfolio and the essential levels of SAFE, to where we're using terminology like initiative and epic because it really fits with what Atlassian does in terms of when they first launched portfolio, which is now advanced roadmaps. So we have roadmaps, we have dependency reports, we have burn up, burn down charts, velocity reports at scale, a lot of things like that.
Sure. And Joshua, if you could just share a brief history of how it actually came into existence.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fun story. It's actually a story I'm sure more than a few apps have gone through, which is, starts in a bar type thing, right? So it's a fun story. So we had, obviously brought SmartDraw, our diagramming app, to the Atlassian Marketplace. We were working closely with Adaptivist to kind of just figure that market out, that world out. And quite literally on the floor of Summit, our CEO, Paul, who's kind of one of the founders of our company, and Jamie Eklund, the original creator of ScriptRunner, were chatting, and Jamie kind of said offhand, it'd be nice if I could somehow call an API with some data to get a diagram. And I was like, well, we don't really have an API, and even then, the diagram's so organic, it's so all over the map, and you can't really do that. And but Paul, being an entrepreneur, kind of got his brain thinking well, we do all this auto layout stuff. So we have all this business logic that auto lays out things. What kind of data are you thinking? And they start to chat a little bit, and then it kind of goes away. Just it's okay, whatever. Let's get back to work. But it really stuck with Paul. He kind of was like an earworm now. Now he's thinking about it, and he quite literally just woke up in the middle of the night one night and kind of had this epiphany of, it's structured, right? A diagram is structured. I know where a shape is, I know where a line is, and if you're not drawing it, right, if you're not worrying about kind of moving things around, that's been SmartDraw's thing forever. So can I make that into some sort of structured text? And he literally sat down, started coding it up, and he had a very rudimentary use of JSON to describe a diagram in text. That's where it started from. And took him about 2 days to get the first pass at it done. Came into the office Tuesday morning, I think it was. Came to my office and was like, so I coded up this thing. I'm thinking of calling SDON. And I was like, okay, what thing? What do you mean? He starts describing. I'm like, oh, it's that thing we were, okay, yeah. And then, next thing you know, we've got this way of describing a diagram in text. That was it. We don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to wrap it as a product, but we have this way of describing diagrams in text. So, it's funny, your first question was, how do you do this? Well, in a perfect world, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes what happens is you're, get engineer kind of something really clever, and you go looking for a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Now it's okay, we have one data point that says, I wanted an API. And we have, over the years, other people have asked us for this. And Visio has some clever stuff. So it kind of started as this way of leveraging SmartDraw. It was this new feature inside of the SmartDraw product that you could use. We went out and we started getting into the community, started talking to prospects and people who really use the Atlassian apps and consultants like Evan, and just really getting into the ground and talking to a lot of people. And it became very clear very quickly as talking to these people that they weren't looking at it like a diagram solution, right? So we were coming into this as we can make a flowchart for you of text, right? And talking to people, as Evan said, it was really clear that it was really clear that there were diagramming solutions, and no one really thinks about diagrams as text. They want to draw something, but oh boy, do they need to visualize the roadmaps. right? At the time, roadmaps were really only available portfolio. They were kind of terrible. People were buying add-ons for it. There's all kinds of reporting that they needed. It was really clear that was the pain.
Yeah.
The pain was actually the reporting, and really specifically, it was the pain around kind of Agile and the nature of parallel work. The nature of, this is not waterfall where we throw things on a schedule, it gets done, gets done, gets done. You've broken the work down into a very atomic nature. Things become very parallel, and now you have Team A is finishing at a slightly faster pace than Team B, but we had to link them up to get it off to Team C. And so I had to make all these little trains land at the right time to actually ship the product. And the nature of that created this problem set. And it was very clear that what we had is not a diagramming solution, a reporting solution, and an ability to visualize that pain. That's how it started, quite literally. It's very organic of, hey, we have this new feature in a product. Actually, no, we don't. We have a new product. And let's pull this feature out, and let's actually turn it into a real product. Let's actually go from a little add-on to our diagram solution to a standalone product that could really make something of it. And that's how it started, literally. And it's evolved over the last 18 months pretty rapidly to be something far different than we ever started with.
Nice.
I would just add too that, if you think about where it came from, it's got two very interesting sides to it. One is we have a lot of these built-in reports that anyone can go in and they can create a solution and tell a story with in a dashboard, as an example. But then if you think about where it came from, it's also a fun developer's tool, because a lot of our customers can go in there with just JavaScript and accessing the API, and they create just some phenomenal things. And really a lot of our built-in scripts, they came from just use cases of conversations we've had about individual customers' pains. And then once we discover that so many customers have the same pains, it's that aha moment. And then you just go in and you repurpose it and put it in as a built-in.
Yeah, nice, interesting. Thank you.
Hey, hey.